Hey, folks, welcome to the Pop Culture SquadCast. It's just me tonight. Well, just me for now. Mike's not going to join us. He's a little under the weather, so hopefully he feels better next week. We're hoping to have a good guest next week. We're still trying to confirm that, but we have some good leads on that. So hopefully everybody stick around and be here for that. We do have a great guest tonight. We have Adam Phillips is going to be joining us very shortly. He is a lifetime veteran of the comic book industry. He has worked for both Marvel and DC and Dynamite and AWA and probably others that, kind of on the backside, probably more to come. I know he'll be in comics for as long as he can. We're going to talk about a lot of cool stuff with comics. We're going to talk about how things happen a little bit behind the scenes with him. He has currently, amongst his other projects going on, a really, really interesting Substack that you should subscribe to. We'll talk about that and what's going on there. But like I said, it's just me tonight. I want to wish, everybody happy summer. People are getting to the point where school's coming out soon. Kids are getting out from school, so vacation plans are in play. We have a lot of guests lined up to be on the show. We want to keep you guys watching us and bringing you really cool stuff. I'm going to bring together a little bit of what's going on in comics this week. And then we'll bring in our guest, Adam. A couple of things. One, and they kind of flow together. Actually, these two things flow together. Mike's column earlier this week was talking about crossovers, and we've talked about them before. I think that the modern crossover really began with Crisis on Infinite Earths. Prior to that, there were some things here and there, but the crossover line-wide thing really started there, along with Secret Wars, and then it's become a quarterly thing for both Marvel and DC, and pretty much anybody else who tries it. And sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. Mike's really enjoying Blood Hunt, and I'm not going to argue with him. It's been good so far. It's definitely been interesting. Let's put it that way from my perspective. But let's look at the new number ones that we have for this week. And first on that list is change this around a little bit. Can we do that? Yeah, let's do it that way. We're playing with lineups and way the images go. I think this one works okay for now. Does this one like this one better? No, I think we'll go back here. We'll keep it here for now. Excuse me, but so we have Black Panther 1, Black Panther Blood Hunt 1. So if you're reading Blood Hunt, this is going to be a big issue. If you're not reading Blood Hunt, I would recommend reading it. It's something significant, as you can see from the cover, has happened to T'Challa. But I think this is, like I said, interesting. Also new this week is the fourth installment of Critical Role Vox Machina Origins, which, if you're a fan of Critical Role and Vox Machina, it kind of takes the team back to like the early start before you get into their first like canonical adventures. So these are earlier adventures. Jodie Houser's writing it. She's really good in this realm, in this area of storytelling, and I like that. It's gonna be June. It's gonna be May. Well, it's gonna be June, coming up very, very shortly, and a bunch of the publishers have this week coming out tomorrow or today. This probably came out today because I don't know that DC switched to Wednesdays yet, but excuse me. It's Pride Month, and we're big fans of Pride Month. We support it in any way we can here, and those bunch of publishers have their anthologies celebrating diversity and LGBTQ plus themes and stories coming out this week. So DC Pride one is a nice one. There's a really interesting. Actually, I'm looking forward to getting this one. For a bunch of the stories, there's an Al Ewing written story, his first DC written story, I think, and it's got the Blue Starman. So I like that a lot. I'm going to check that out. And also in this, there is a story, kind of an autobiographical story written by Phil Jimenez that someone else drew, and I want to see that. Phil Jimenez is somebody who has always meant a lot to me as a creator and a person. So, Death Ratioed from AWA. So Mark Russell was on the show earlier this year and we're talking about this. This is really interesting, and I don't know if Adam might be able to tell us anything about this. He was there for a while. They might have been under the it might have been in production at that point by then. But this book is something you're going to want to check out. It's got basically taking our modern society on, getting likes, doing things for the click, doing things for the gram, and whatever's out there, and constantly being judged in the public, and it having consequences in this, kind of alternate telling of a society. So it's Mark Russell. It's going to be good. We're excited about this one for a particular reason. This is a one-shot. It's Godzilla 50th anniversary of Godzilla, which, if you're a fan of the kaiju, this is good for you. But also, we're really excited that Rich Dueck is writing this. So that's why we're highlighting this one. Grommets is a new book from Rick Remender under his Giant Generator label. And all the stuff that's been coming out from Giant Generator, I've been liking a lot. And I'm a big fan of Rick Remender in general. Brian Posen, and I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. He is an actor, comedian, and he is co-writing this, I think. So that is pretty interesting. Helverine is coming out this week by Ben Percy. Ben Percy was a great choice to write Wolverine. I'm sure he had a lot of say in that as well, but he is really taken on the voice of Wolverine in a lot of the books, and this is something that kind of came out of one of the stories he was telling earlier. And Marvel's good with giving things a shot, so that's what this one is. Again, we're back to Blood Hunt, and this one, Midnight Suns Blood Hunt #1, it's written by Brian Hill, so I like that. Germán Peralta is drawing it. It is, it's got blood and fire, basically, is what you're talking about. It's got, apparently the tagline is the original Midnight Suns have to go after Blade. And if you're reading Blood Hunt, you might know why that is. A little spoilery. This book is going to be huge. So my favorite thing is Monsters Volume 2 comes out this week. From Fantagraphics. My favorite thing is Monsters by Emil Ferris. In, I think it was 2017 it came out, so 2018 award season. It won everything. It was the biggest hit of that year in terms of graphic novels, and so Volume 2 is coming out now. I think this is the completion of the story, at least for now, but this will be something people are going to want to read. Rye, Book of the Dark. So this book, written by Dan Abnett, art by Emilio Utera. So we're now fully into this concept where Alien Books is this publisher, and I don't know much about them, is publishing or licensed the Valiant catalog, and so they are putting out new stories with the Valiant logo on the top and Alien Books on the bottom of the Marvel style box. Rye is the latest one, and I like Dan Abnett's writing, so I'm looking forward to this one. Again, we're on to celebrating Pride Month, and IDW is doing that with Star Trek, and Star Trek, has always had its feet squarely in the realm of acceptance and diversity. And over the past decade or so has become even more on screen diverse in terms of sexuality and gender um, on in their shows. So as you can see by the cover and who are on this cover, there's plenty of characters to choose from, and we're looking forward to it. Some really good creators who are working on this book. So this one comes out this week. This is the latest creator-owned book from Mike Oming. It's called William of Newbury, and Mike Oming, besides being a fantastic penciler and inker and storyteller of other people's work, is a good writer and tells a really good story that when he's drawing himself. So I'm excited for this. It's definitely got a really good backstory. You should check out the solicit. I recommend it. I'm looking forward to getting it this week. I think this is the last book that we're going to talk about. We're going to get to our guests. So thanks for hanging in there with me. This is the wedding special from X-Men. It's a Marvel Voices Pride special edition. It's a one-shot with a few stories in them. Kieran Gillen writing, Teenie Howard, Tate Bromball, Wyatt Kennedy. There's art by Rachel Stott, Philip Sevi, Emilio Piliu, Stephen Byrne, and Jen Senong. It is ostensibly Mystique and Destiny's wedding, which is important. The couple has, since their first appearance, have become canonically a couple, and there's some significant things that I'm not sure if they were kind of spoiled in the Free Comic Book Day issue, and I think that's what it was. But there's some very important changes to characters' histories that are getting done in this, at least for now. We're not sure what the post Krakoa era is and how it's going to change things as well. But this is again a book that celebrates diversity, which the X-Men have always embodied, at least for the past 40, 50 years. And that's it. Hope everybody likes those books. I hope everybody goes out and buys new books. You know how we say here, read more comics. They're good for you. We love that. Excuse me, folks. I'm on my own, so I'm going to need to hydrate a little bit. All right. I'm not going to take much more time, and I want to bring in our guest. As I said earlier, Adam Phillips is a veteran of the comic book industry. He started working freelance for Marvel in the mid to late 80s on Marvel Age. I'm not going to talk about Marvel Age. And then in 94, from 94 to 2021, was on staff at DC doing an inordinate number of different tasks, roles, jobs, and I'd like to talk about that. And since he stopped working for DC, he is now on his own, freelancing, doing a whole bunch of different things in the realm of comics, and we're going to bring him in right now. So switch that out. Hey, Adam, how are you?
All right. Bob, good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad you're here. We've talked a bunch of times about different things, and I'm glad we're able to put this together and get you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I have a tons of questions we're going to get to, but I'd like to talk a little bit about kind of the thing in the front of mind is Untold Stories with Adam Phillips, which is your Substack that you're doing right now. And if people aren't subscribing to it, they should. It is you'll see it at the bottom of the screen where you can click on it and go ahead and grab that. But what is your goal of it? And I'd like to talk about some of the individual things, but what's your goal of what you're trying to get done?
Yeah. So I wanted to have an opportunity. I wanted to write about comics, marketing, and third thing, life in general. But so I'm writing a lot about comics and marketing of comics, the kind of insights I've gotten over the years of working in marketing uh, for comics and working with retailers and the distributors as well. I've been in a lot of, yeah, this is the one that went out today. I'm in the middle of a 3-part epic on which I'm calling the variant cover conundrum, because for retailers, variant covers are very much can't live with them, can't live without them. And there's a lot to be said. The one that you got a little peek there in the image was an example of an homage cover done for an AWA title that came out a little over a year ago. Yeah, and I've been writing. I mean, I'm like 12 weeks ahead right now. Got notes for about 20 more episodes after that I haven't written yet.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm sorry Mike's not here, because we could get into like a long conversation about variant covers with Mike.
Mike and I go way back also. I don't know if he mentioned to you, but like we were active in the same fanzines essentially in the 80s.
I believe it.
Yeah. Kappa Alpha. We were both members of Kappa Alpha, which is, I don't know if you know about APPAs, but they're like fanzines. So they were fanzine adjacent,
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
anyway.
That's awesome. There's not a week that goes by that I don't learn something new about Mike that you're like, what? So
that's crazy. I love it. Yeah, I wish he was here, but maybe another time.
Yeah, no. But variant covers are. I mean, I don't buy them. Actually, that's not true.
It happens.
I typically don't. I'll tell you one thing. The behind me, the Mr. Miracle, when that was coming out, I bought both covers just because they were both ridiculously gorgeous.
Yes. There are times.
And then I bought something else. Oh yeah, there was something I got. I was just getting one of, or it was like a one shot or something like that. And I said, I'll take the Art Adams cover.
Yeah. Well, it's a very tricky tightrope for retailers to walk, because they, a lot of them want to have a decent selection of those variant covers, but they have to buy a lot of copies of the open to order variants to get the the higher ratio variant. So like if it's a 1 in 50 variant that you want, then you're gonna have to find a way to get 50 copies of a book, just to unlock that order.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is tough. And I talked to my local shop a lot about how they do things and how they want to be able to get things, and everything for them is about their bottom line. It's as much as they're all fans and they want the industry to do well, they have to keep their doors open. And the variant conundrum is exactly that. Yes, you want them, but then you have to get them, and then it becomes like this slippery slope that you can you end up buying too much of something because you wanted to get that cover, but now you've got it, and can you sell it and make it back what you're losing on not selling those other books?
Right. Can I ask what's your local?
It's Cosmic Comics they're in Linthicum, Maryland.
Oh, okay. I don't think I know them actually, but yeah,
they're so I'm in Maryland. I go to them every week. There's a couple of others I go to. I go to Third Eye, for special events. Sure, you know them. And Cosmic and Comics, Cards, and Collectibles is also.
Oh yeah, sure.
I go every once in a while,
Yeah.
Mark can say hi. Yeah,
Mark's a great guy, and I'm a big fan of Baltimore Comic Con.
Right.
Which is, I haven't been in a few years, but it's
you should come because it's good. You come, we'll do a panel together or something.
Oh, that'll be fantastic. Yeah. So anyway, I'm writing a lot about, just a lot of different topics for comics. But other things too. Like I wrote one recently when when you know how when the pandemic lockdown started and people got into different things that they were doing.
Right.
One of the things I was doing was I read all the Discworld books by Terry Pratchett,
Okay.
and you know, I read. I mean, I didn't read them straight through. I read like one of his, and then a couple of other books, and then back to one of his, and I finished them relatively recently. There's 40 books about. So I wrote an episode that'll be coming up in a few weeks about Terry Pratchett and, you know, how much I loved his books, and a lot of it has to do with the diversity and acceptance of lots of different sorts of characters within the pages of his books. I mean, I don't like to, you know, there are a lot of fantasy series by big names, you know, that could have learned a few things from him, but you know, unfortunately did not.
Sure.
I've got an episode coming up that I actually took from a Facebook post of mine that I remembered from like 4 years ago, where I just put out the word like, okay, what are the best comics that never have been collected? And
Wasteland.
oh yeah, Wasteland's a great one. I'll have to add that to the list.
Oh, listen, that is my that's my white whale. I want Wasteland to be collected and reprinted. Wasteland's an example of one of those variant covers. The unexpected variants, because I think issue 6 was wrong. It was like the wrong cover on issue 5. Like the issue 6 cover was on issue 5. Yeah.
Wasn't Mike the editor on that?
He was.
Well,
we talk about Wasteland a lot on this show. So
cool.
Yeah, we're trying to. That's one of the things I'm trying to keep him young with. So
nice. I like that.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's one. What else did you come up with?
Yeah,
can you give us any hints?
What else I come up with that need to be collected?
It hasn't never been collected.
The Marvel Jack Kirby 2001: A Space Odyssey. The Black Hole comic strip adaptation by Kirby.
Never been collected?
Nah. And there's a version there was a newspaper strip version by Kirby, and then there was a comic book version drawn by Dan Spiegel. And I think to make it a decent sized book, you'd put them both together.
There you go.
I would like to see a collection of all the comics, or a lot of the comics, out of the National Lampoon.
Sure.
There was tons of good stuff in there, and it's just like lost, you know. So there's a lot of, and then other people. I mean, my friend, you know Roger Ash.
Sure.
He said the Howard the Duck newspaper strip, and it's like, yeah, of course.
Right.
And there actually is.
That is unsurprising to me at all.
No, of course. He's like the only person who loves Howard the Duck more than I do, I think.
Sure.
Douglas Woke suggested the Marvel romance comics from the late 60s and early 70s. Why not?
Mm-hmm.
Marty Grosser had a whole bunch of stuff from Charlton and Dell.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how do you do that though? How do you even do those things? Like,
no, that's a great question. And some of them are being collected. Some of the things he's suggesting, like Gorgo, I think somebody's doing that under the, aegis of it's a Steve Ditko comic.
Sure. So. But like, you might know who owns the publishing rights or the original stuff, like the Charlton stuff that now are DC owned characters.
Well, that's a great question. I mean, if it's Charlton and if it's a DC owned property, then DC owns the rights
to the character. But what about could they?
No, I don't think you could get away with that, unfortunately.
Right.
But that.
So it'll never happen because.
Quite possibly not. If it's Charlton Action Heroes, I mean, they did do a couple of Action Hero archives, but there's a ton of that material.
Sure.
Anyway,
one of the things that's surprisingly never that hasn't been collected. In modern times, like there's only been, I think, one collection ever of Infinity Inc.
Oh, yeah.
And it's impossible to find. Like, it I don't know. It was a small print run. There's hardly any of them. It's not like it's expensive. It's just you can't get them.
Yeah, right.
But that's that was an important thing that they've never kind of gone back and collected.
No, absolutely. Yeah, that whole era is kind of lost. And unfortunately, I'm one of the people who got shown the door a few years ago, and a lot of institutional knowledge about DC was lost. And I mean, as much as I know people loved Infinity Inc., it kind of passed me by at the time. I really didn't, see it. But I look, if we could do print on demand and make it work, maybe that would be a way to do it. But they don't have the bandwidth to do it at DC these days. And I know because I talked to people from DC. I mean, supposedly tonight I'm going to a get together at a local taco place.
Nice.
With a bunch of DC folks, and they're understaffed, unfortunately, for these days.
Sure, we can see that.
It's too bad. But I was going to say that was quite a list of books you were talking about there. Man, that's a big week.
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
Those are just new number one. So every week I do a list of the number one or special trade collections or graphic novels, and those are just the first issues that are coming out. There's there's a lot more actual in series books that are coming out that are big this week. It's a big week for a Fifth Wednesday,
Right. I have to get that Rick Remender and Brian Poston book in particular.
Yeah.
Rick's often really an interesting writer. I think I like his work a lot. I mean, I don't know everything, but I read a couple of years ago a book he did called A Righteous Thirst for Vengeance, and I think that was phenomenal. With it. Yeah. So,
he's got a lot of really cool stuff. I kind of want to change topics and come back. We'll get to a bunch of stuff.
Sure.
But you brought up a point, we're a few years apart in age, and one of the things I was reading as I read your Substack, one of the things you talk about is you grew up kind of a Marvel zombie versus a DC kid, right? And so that was was that early 70s when you were starting to become aware of it?
I started buying comics under my own power around 1974.
Right.
Before then, I read comics a lot, but they were only comics that were given to me when my mother's parents would come to visit. They'd always hand me a comic book.
So what was it about Marvel in 74 in that range that attracted you versus what DC was doing?
Sure. Oh, it was
it's a bit of a dead zone. That early 70s was a tough time for both of them.
Right. Well, when I started reading Spider-Man, it was 2 months after the first book I started buying myself was Amazing Spider-Man, and it was right after Gwen Stacy had died, and I didn't know what was going on other than, somebody important was dead, and it was very, very sad. It was a soap opera,
Sure.
For with people in costumes,
right?
So that got me hooked, and then I started reading Iron Man pretty quickly after that, Captain Marvel, Defenders, and it all had that. A lot of those books had that same quality of being, what's going to happen next, and DC would tend to end their books on a finished story, and then the next issue would be a new story, or maybe it would. If it was like Justice League and it was a crossover with the Justice Society, you'd have a couple of issues that connected. But Marvel, it was like every issue was a cliffhanger.
Interesting.
So you really got pulled back in, like you had to find out what happened next month.
That's cool. I like to talk to people about how that does, because I grew up, like I said, a few years after that. I started reading comics, buying on my own, 82, 81, 82. And I definitely steered more towards the DC side of things, even though I got X-Men and New Mutants, but those were the books that and then Defenders, but the later Defenders. And then it just didn't matter. Then I just collected all. I wasn't one or the other. But But it's interesting. I like to see why people choose one or the other.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't totally avoid DC, but mostly I didn't really buy any.
Right.
But I would read my friends' copies of The Flash and some of the war books. And I also, within a couple of years, really gravitated toward okay, these are the artists I really like.
Sure.
you know, at DC, it would be Joe Kubert, um, who, because on the War books, of course, he was on doing every cover
Right.
as well as some of the stories. So,
Yeah.
Anyway,
I remember. So I remember. I remember getting the Marvel Tales reprint of the death of Gwen Stacy, and that's something that like it's weird that people today don't understand. Like I will see people like buying, like spending a lot of money on Marvel Tales, and I never understood that. Or Classic X-Men. I'm like, they're reprints. They're just reprints.
they're just reprints.
Like they're just, why would you? It's a re. I mean, like it was good because I couldn't. We didn't have collections when we were younger. There
Yeah.
weren't. The only way you could ever, you knew that happened. Like you knew something happened in that issue, but
Right.
you never saw it unless you got a hold of that particular issue, which was a lot more difficult then, or that Marvel Tales came out and you read that.
Yeah. Yeah, in the 70s, Marvel had tons of reprint books, Marvel's Greatest Comics, Marvel Triple Action, Marvel Super Special, Marvel.
Right.
I mean, there was
DC did the same thing too.
Yeah. It was just a race to fill
there
up
was
slots on the newsstands.
Like 30 issues of X-Men reprints.
Yes, which I was just thinking about that today because I started reading the X-Men. So you probably know this, but like before Giant Size X-Men #1, there was 2 or 3 years where the X-Men kept popping up in Marvel Team Up, Captain America, probably a couple of other places. Just like, I think, the Defenders. Professor X shows up for a couple of issues in the Defenders, I believe. And so I started reading the reprint X-Men, so I was actually reading X-Men before they went back to new stories with issue 94.
Right. It's weird. Like a lot of people, don't know or aren't aware that there was 3 or 4 years of just reprints of X-Men. There were no new X-Men comics until Giant Size X-Men #1. And I didn't.
And now there's a lot of X-Men comics.
There's this. I have a board over here that's like things to write about. One of them is too many X-Men. There's a line. It says on my board, too many X-Men.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's nothing new.
Yeah.
Anyway, you touched on something in your list of. Sorry, my eyes are a little irritated. You touched on something in your list of new comics, by the way, that I wanted to discuss, which is that you mentioned the new Rye series that's starting, and you were talking about Alien books a little bit.
Yeah.
And this is something I was thinking about talking about here today anyway, which is like there's a weird, like, since COVID, because of the distribution changes in the comics business, people, retailers in particular, have been talking a lot about fragmentation in the marketplace, because now they have to order from not just Diamond, but maybe Lunar or Random Penguin, Random House.
All 3 of them. They have to buy from all 3 of them.
Right. But there's another aspect of this of the fragmentation, which is that there are a lot of publishers popping up, like very small publishers. Alien Books is actually a pretty big publisher compared to some of these guys. But I mean, it feels like every week or every 2 weeks, there's a new company that says, hey, we're going to start publishing comics. And I keep looking at them and just thinking, like, how are they ever going to be able to sell enough copies to, sustain themselves when they're so far removed from. And anyway, Alien Books has a whole line of other books that are outside the Valiant universe. And the one I had a really hard time finding it, Howard Chaykin did a graphic novel for them. I think it came out last year, called Sunshine Patriots.
Yes, I didn't realize that was Alien Books, but I'm familiar with that.
And I was like, this looks fascinating because it's a story about the Rough Riders, Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Riders, and early Hollywood and stuff. And I was like, I got to get this. So
wasn't that a Zoop done? Wasn't that done through Zoop?
I think it might have been, yeah. But I mean, that's just the crowdfunding aspect of it. Anyway, my point being just like, there are so many publishers out there now. I just don't understand how these smaller ones can sustain themselves.
Well,
So it's crazy.
so you worked for a smaller one for a while after
Yeah.
leaving DC. How from the inside of that, is that something that without, I don't want you to get anybody in trouble or anything, but like, how is that going from, one of the
Oh
big
yeah.
boys on the block to, you know to being inside one of the smaller ones?
Sure. Well, first of all, fortunately, before I was at DC, I was at a small publisher that was affiliated with comics, Welsh Publishing Group, and they did. Hey, hi Dean, how are you? Nice to see you, buddy. Keep your shirt on. um,
Hard for him to do.
um, anyway, what was the thing? Right. Welsh Publishing Group was comics adjacent, as I like to say, and I edited or co-edited a magazine for that was related to DC called Superman and Batman magazine.
Right.
But that was a small staff, that was like 30 people or whatever. So like the smaller the staff, the more hats you're going to wear in a day. And I didn't find it too difficult to switch back to that after leaving DC, because even though DC is a big company with a lot of staff doing lots of different things, it was like, the areas that I was involved with were fairly narrow. And, at the end of the day, it was like I was doing things. Like I remember having a conversation with an SVP there where he was talking about how he misses being able to do things himself, because now he spends all his time doing administrative work. And I was at a level where I was still always doing things myself. It felt like mostly,
Right.
So I didn't find the adjustment too hard. I will say AWA, which was a very small house, Dynamite is too, but Dynamite puts out a lot of material. AWA, small group, but they don't put out the kind of quantity that Dynamite does, of course.
That has a lot to do with licensing.
It has a lot to do with licensing. Yeah, I mean, AWA, I don't think I'm telling tales out of school to say a year ago were really trying to get some licenses. And the trouble with trying to get licenses as a publisher when you haven't done it before is you really need something to show.
Right.
You can say, this is how we would do it. And Dynamite has had a long history of licensing. So, it wasn't quite as difficult for them to demonstrate, like, okay, this is how it's going to work. And of course they had other things working in their favor. So, and they've done really, really well. Dynamite has done so well with their Disney books and now their Warner Brothers title.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Hanna-Barbera stuff. Yep. Yeah, that's the thing. But like, so with somebody like AWA, where is there a difference inside this, where the way I saw that or continue to see that organization is very story focused. Like we're trying to be, we're about the story, not necessarily about the medium, but like they're like, this is the medium for this story type of thing.
Sure.
It's one of the things I liked about it is when I knew you went there, I was excited about that because I think they put out some good stuff, and obviously, things work the way they do. If so, you've been around this for a long time, and a question I had, kind of leaning up to this is, what are comic publishers as a whole missing today?
That's a tough one. I will say I wish I had a chance at AWA to sort of have a little more influence on things, because what I felt like they needed was like some sort of more of a continuing character or series, and they did start off with that.
Sure.
The J. Michael Straczynski books,
Right.
but they didn't really continue it as well as they might have. And the thing with having all these miniseries is that like every single one has to be re-explained to the comic shop owners and to the fans. Like, what's the premise? Who are the characters? And what are we getting out of this?
Yeah, and I'll
Whereas,
buy issue 1, but I'm not going to load up on issue 2, right?
well, yeah, that's the other thing is like keeping people's interest after the first issue or even the second issue is hard. So you do. I feel like you do need a compelling character who's going to continue to carry the water for the publisher, and who can, you know, you can't just make up Batman out of thin air. But if you can have somebody who kind of crosses over into different stories and things, I think that could, add interest.
It is.
That's hard. I mean, really, the only shared universes out there are Marvel, DC, and Valiant.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, Jeff's trying to do that with
Jeff. You're right. Jeff, of course, is doing that with Ghost Machine. Of course, that's new, and I'm really enjoying what they're doing. Actually,
oh sure. I mean,
fantastic.
He's got a murderer's row worth of artists to just illustrate everything, and but yeah, like that's important. Like so, do you think? Right. So there's this concept of we have plenty of superhero stories, but do you think that that for a publisher to thrive, there needs to be some level of continuity within their books? They can't just be, or you think it's much more difficult if they're just a bunch of disparate series that have nothing to do with one another?
It is difficult to sell in those series
because of lack of brand awareness. Is that
and I mean, I hate to say it, but like it's not just AWA, but there are quite a few publishers who like building that brand identity is very difficult. And I think what a lot of them are doing is just kind of going like, we're gonna do what Vertigo did in the 90s only for today. And it's like, that's unfortunately, I don't know that that's enough to hang your hat on.
Well, Vertigo also had Sandman to walk through it.
Well, yeah, exactly. Sandman and Swamp Thing before that, which were huge hits and really changed a lot of the direction of the comics publishing industry. I mean,
oh yeah,
Swamp Thing wasn't Vertigo at the beginning, and it became Vertigo eventually, and Sandman became Vertigo. I don't think I'm not sure it was I guess it was Vertigo at the beginning.
It wasn't because Sandman came out in '88, I think.
Okay.
And Vertigo didn't start till like 92, 93.
Yeah. The success of those was enough to build that imprint around.
Mm-hmm. So there's a bunch of other, publishers like, so there's a publishing company that kind of hangs around and they have lost all confidence in me. Like I don't talk about them anymore. I don't promote them anymore because I can't trust that what I see in a solicit is going to actually happen.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
But there are other companies that are making good stories. They're getting me interested with the solicitation. I go and I read the stories, and so I gain a level of trust that the people running this organization know what's a good story and know what to put out there.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
And now, like one example of that is like Mad Cave, right? What Mad Cave's done over the last 5 years has been pretty good, I think.
Yes.
Now they have some licensing,
right?
That are licenses that I'm very interested in, and you as well, I can tell.
I'm excited about what they're doing, and I was talking to them for a little while about coming on board, but it hasn't materialized yet. We'll see if it does.
Well, I hope it does because I think that'll be a great match. To be honest with you, we had Mike on a few weeks ago, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, and you know him.
Yes, I do. It's funny. Last year at New York Comic Con, every time I turned around, there was Mike Martz. I don't know why. I ran into him like over and over again.
Right.
So, he's a good guy. I think he's got a good vision for what he's doing, and the addition of the licensing. I mean, licensed books are tricky because things have to be approved, and you're sharing that revenue that comes in from the books. But at the same time, they've got a built-in audience.
Yeah, and that's great. And like I said, that's one of the things that I'm thinking about this as we're talking, because having those licenses are great, but we both know that a license is only for a certain amount of time. You don't know that it's going to get renewed. You don't know that you're going to keep that license in that book.
Right.
You don't know what's going to happen. I mean, you made I don't know the details of what happened with DC and the Hanna-Barbera books, but that's ridiculous. But
I don't know.
I know, I'm not saying you do. I'm just saying that for years I was screaming, why is there not a Johnny Quest book written by Jeff Parker every month from DC? And then all of a sudden now they don't even have the license anymore.
Yeah. That was a weird thing, and I don't really know the workings of it exactly, except I do know that, the approach DC had, which I thought was a lot of fun, was to take those characters and really re-envision them. So, the Wacky Racers were kind of a road warrior thing. And
Right.
man, the Flintstones was the first place I really took note of Mark Russell, you were talking about earlier. And I just thought, I had to make sure to get the hardcover when that came out, because I just was like, this thing is just so good.
I kind of slept on the Flintstones at the first, and with me it was Snagglepuss.
Yeah, there you go, another great one from him. But at some point, I think my guess at least is that the people in consumer Warner Brothers consumer products kind of said, well, maybe we don't need to sort of run them through the funhouse mirror quite this hard.
Oh,
I'm guessing.
I don't know. But like I said, what I was trying to get to, I think, is that what do you do? Like, let's say you're a Mad Cave, and you have these really good licenses. How do you sustain that readership once you no longer have that license? Like that, here's your opportunity to really develop that brand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there's a lot of things that they can do. It depends first of all on your creative team. Like Dynamite has had a lot of success with Gargoyles because they've got the original creator of the series writing the book.
Sure. Right.
And that helps enormously.
And it's great.
Yeah. And if you can get the right talent on a book, or bring in, let's say you've done 8 issues under one writer or artist or whatever, and then like somebody who's a bigger name or a well-known person who's been involved in the series in the past wants to come in and do something, maybe they'll do that. It's all
Dynamite's done a really good job of that, I have to say.
Yeah.
Whether it's Sonya or whether it's James Bond or whatever, they've done a good job of keeping high level creative talent on the books and getting people in like that. So that's fair. That's good.
Yeah, it's true.
What do you think that publishers are doing good today? Like, what is it that's keeping us going?
That's tricky.
Or are there things that feel like are good? Like, one of the things we talk about on this show, Mike likes to talk about, especially, and when he was at DC the first time, was a big proponent of, is making sure that the next generation of readers are invested in the medium.
Yeah.
And I don't know that they're all doing it, but I think there's some level of intent today.
Yeah, that is also another very tricky area. And actually, I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, because it's like right now the biggest seller of graphic novels in North America is probably Scholastic.
Mm-hmm.
But getting kids to transition from reading Dave Pilkey to a monthly comic book, or even from manga to a monthly comic book series, is really, I don't know how to make that, to bridge that gap.
Yeah, so it's tough. It's tough on the monthly stuff. It's tough I think it's tough to get kids to read monthlies.
Right.
If you don't mind, I'm going to tell a little story. My parents were here last week because we had a wedding in the family, and I sent them home. My brother lives down there. He wasn't able to make it up, but he has his stepson who is my nephew now, and he is 12, and my brother had called me. He's like, he reads manga. He's finished like almost all of One Piece. He needs something to read. What should I tell him? Because he doesn't know. And I'm like, all right, I'll get some stuff. So I sent my parents home with some extra stuff I had from extra Ringo Award and Harvey Award swag and stuff like that.
Yes.
And one of them was Leon by Jamar Nicholas.
Oh, sure.
And which is a Scholastic book. And my brother called me like that night. He's already read it. He read the whole thing. He loved it. He's so great. He's like, he's going to read Rainbow Bridge, and then he's going to read Kaya. So Rainbow Bridge is a Mad Cave book, I think.
Yeah.
Mad Cave. It's Steve Orlando wrote it. And then Kaya is Wes Craig's book, which I like a lot. And I think that book is perfect for like a young to middle to, I mean, I love it as an adult, but it's also, I think it skews younger, that it's all ages. And like, that's the kind of thing, like you can get them to go from Leon to the next thing if it's entertaining and it hits their stuff.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with monthly comics too is an awful lot of us. Oh, look, you can just barely see my new dog in the background here.
Hey, new dog. What is his
Odie? Yeah.
Nice. I see him. He's just poking his head out. There we go.
Oh, now he's on the bed. Get off the bed, Odie. I'll tell the story about Odie in a minute.
Yeah, I love
pretty
to hear
big. Anyway, an awful lot of us who are like serious comics collectors, we were terrible at sports, or we were sickly, or there was like something that made us like want to take out our put our energies into something different, collecting comics or whatever. And that's not something you can program into people. It just has to sort of happen,
right?
So it's hard. Anyway,
so I mean, like, is there something else that you think that we're doing well?
I mean, yeah, look, I think the events that are happening right now, Blood Hunt and what's the DC one called?
Infinite Power or something like that.
Yeah,
some sort of something. Mark's doing it.
They're well thought out. I mean, I think like I'll repeat what Dan DiDio used to say, which is like at the end of the day, nobody sets out to make a bad comic, and they're well thought out, they're well packaged. Generally, if you've got a big event like Blood Hunt or something, and it's got all these different chapters and things, not every chapter is going to be the best possible chapter of the series, but hopefully they'll hold up. I do think Marvel made an interesting choice by doing those bagged variant covers, because
that's interesting.
Retailers really sat up and started talking about it and saying, hey, wait a minute, is this gonna, there was a variety of opinions about would it be good, would it be bad, would it be controversial or whatever, but at the end of the day, people were talking about it.
Yep.
And they were can I help you, sir? People were talking about it. People were talking about Blood Hunt in general. And I mean, that got everyone's attention. So
sure.
They should get points for that, I think.
I think so. I mean, they're talking, like one of the best things about, being kind of this collector type or comic book reader, where you go to the shop and, you walk in, you get your books, and then you jump into the conversation that's happening at the counter, and people are like, should I get the bagged variant? Should I not get the bagged variant? Well, first issue was, a couple of extra pages and a little more bloody, and should I get this one? And the next one maybe is good. And I'm like, I'm never one to jump in with the bagged stuff or this. I mean, that.
What do they charge for those? Do you know?
It's $1 more.
Oh, only $1 more. That's
only $1 more. Yeah. So I mean, like, that's a good price. You get for $1 more, you get a couple extra pages and more blood. My friend of mine who he's like, I'm just gonna get the bagged one from now on because I think that it's worth it. So I
always feel like when you get something that comes in a bag, I don't want to open the bag.
Right. You didn't want to open that Spider-Man #1 that was in the bag.
I have a friend of mine got me a copy of the Godzilla versus Kong versus the Justice League with the sound chip in it,
Oh my goodness.
which the head of production from DC for many years, Allison Gill,
Hmm.
kept saying over and over for years, like, the biggest thing she wants to try is to get noise into the comic, and she finally achieved that. As she was walking out the door into retirement a few months ago,
Right.
so she was very pleased to get that done.
That's awesome. Well, they got, you also did the scratch and sniff too. Well, that was,
Yes, we couldn't call it that, but we did
yes,
do it.
yes. Yeah. That was quite an accomplishment. That was quite a feat.
God, that was so crazy.
I've talked to Jimmy about it, and it's one of the things he likes to talk about just because of how crazy it was.
Oh yeah, it was absolutely crazy. It was totally him pushing for it,
Yeah.
and I mean, at least we managed to do it. But he's so much fun.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
So one of the things about untold stories, you're telling the stories that are untold, right? I mean,
Previously untold stories.
previously untold
I
stories.
could have called it.
But there's also some knowledge that you're sharing.
Yeah, that's my idea, at least.
About the industry, about business, about how to work within it. Like, what are the things that you think are important for people to know that you think they don't know?
Sure. Well, one thing I like to say, and there was an article I was sort of interviewed for a few years ago, and which is that, like, the retailers are your. Originally, I said the first audience that you have to convince. Now I've kind of come around to, like, maybe not the first audience, because, like, the fans have to get excited about a project, but they are such an integral part of your audience because they have so much to do. They are so busy, and there's so much pressure on them that, like, anything you can do to make their jobs easier and just put material in front of them so they can say, yes, I get it, will only serve you well, And I built a lot of those relationships over the years with retailers, and I always think they pay off. And actually, I was going to tell you about this trip we just took a little bit, because one of the exciting moments of, well, I only got to go to 2 comic shops along the way. Basically, backstory for everybody real quick. The dog that I was talking about here, up till a month ago, lived in Buffalo, New York with my mother-in-law. And and we had promised years ago that we would take the dog when she got to the point where she really couldn't properly care for him anymore. She said, like, okay, now's the time. So we flew out and we drove back in a rented car with the dog because he's so big. We didn't really want to put him in, like, the cargo hold of an airplane. That would be sad for him.
Sure.
So anyway, we drove. So I got to go to a couple of comic shops along the way, and one of them I was super excited to visit for the first time ever, Mile High Comics.
Yeah,
in Colorado.
I love that.
What an incredible place! And I was really sad that Chuck Rosansky, the owner, was not there that day. He's been dealing with the after recovery from a car accident, and he's doing pretty well, but he wasn't there that day. But I got to talk to his second in command, Will Moulton, who I've known a little bit for a long time as well. And we've, emailed back and forth and stuff. And so, like, even though I'm not, like, I'm not currently employed, but I know when I go back to an employer and I can call up somebody at Mile High and talk to Will or one of the other people I talked to that day, they're happy to hear from me and they want to know what I have to say. And the same thing goes for, like, communicating with retailers in other ways, by email, or there's a private Facebook page that retailers are on that publishers talk to them on. And, anyway, the point being that, like, those relationships are absolutely vital to how I succeed in my job of marketing comics.
Sure. I think that's a great point. I think that's it. Mike he's not here, so I'll use his euphemisms. We live in this, and we live in this donut shop, that everybody kind of knows everybody, and we all kind of do our thing, and it's a great donut shop, but having those relationships with people and maintaining that is a big part of succeeding in this industry, wherever you want to succeed or however you're trying to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely.
My day job takes me to Denver fairly often.
Cool.
A few times a year, and I always I always try and make an effort to go over to Mile High, because it was the first time I went there. It was like this mecca. Like, these are the people that were in the back of the books. This is the only place you can get back issues when I was a kid.
Yeah, absolutely. And I even bought a couple of things. That was like,
sure. They've moved it around. They used to they used to have like that in the center section. There was like 20 boxes of dollar comics at least. Like, they were just all tons, and it was like 20. It was like $1 each, but like 30 for 20.
Right.
And I reached the limit of my my airline weight thing.
Well, the thing I got there that I was excited about was the last of the run of the original Marvel calendars that I was looking for.
Right. Because also, there's some other details, and we don't have to share it all, but if you go to the Substack, there's some details in there about this trip. So yeah. So why that calendar?
Yeah, right. I did talk about that because the first store we went to was in Buffalo, and it's called Empire Comics, and I've been there a couple of times, and they're real nice people, and it's such a world of difference because Empire Comics is a nice, small, intimate shop, and you could hide in the back of Mile High Comics, and probably they'd never find you.
There's several cats that live in Mile High Comics that nobody ever knows about, right?
Right.
It is a giant warehouse that you would never imagine has what it has. But I was there. There was something they had just gotten broken into at one point, though. Still, there's but it's crazy, yeah. And right. I think Empire Comics has made it on Pop Culture Squad before too. I think Ed's been there and mentioned it in his travels in upstate New York.
Yes. When I was in Buffalo, actually, Ed was like, we arrived in Buffalo a few days before Ithacon, and he was like, come on down. I was like, dude, I would love to, but I can't.
Right. So, yeah, it was a good show. You missed a great show. It was a lot of fun this year.
Oh, I have no doubt. I love a Comic-Con.
Yeah, so that was one of my questions for you. I wanted you spent a lot of time when you were at DC, running their booths and stuff. What is the craziest safe, available to tell story that you have from a con?
Oh, sure. I've got a couple, but I tell you, the main thing I did at DC for cons was I would like DC at San Diego used to have 18 or 20 panels.
Sure.
And I would build the presentations for all the panels, and I'd clear them with the editors. And if you go into that panel room, you can either set up your laptop at the podium, or you can be like way off on the side somewhere. But mostly the people who are running the panels like to have me right there, because then they can go on, switch to that or whatever. Anyway, so we had a Batman 75th anniversary at San Diego one year, and it was a real murderer's row of people on the panel. It was Neil Adams, Denny O'Neil, Grant Morrison, Peter Tomasi. I want to say Bruce Timm and Paul Dini were both in that panel as well. Bruce Timm definitely. I think Paul was too. And the two things I'll say about that, because they both were weird. Before the panel started, we were trying to make sure everyone was just like going to get there, So we were sitting in this sort of holding room, And it was a very weird, like nobody was really talking. We were all kind of waiting to be pulled into. Then somebody started talking about how he's hungry and wishes he could get a sandwich. Do they have it? And I don't know. They were talking about sandwiches, and then Bruce Timm said something about like when you go to a sub shop, never get the meatball sub. It was the strangest thing to say. We were like, what? And he said he worked at a sub shop when he was like 17 or something, and they make the meatballs out of all the oldest meat in the house in the restaurant. We're like, dude. And then the other thing out of that panel that I thought was really funny.
I'm sure Denny was very excited about that.
I don't know. It was just odd. So I was sitting next to the podium, like at the first spot on the table, and then there was Denny right next to me, and then Neil Adams and a couple of other people, and then Grant Morrison. And it was like somebody asked a question of Grant, and Grant says in his heavy Scottish accent that I can in no way really replicate, what you've got to understand about Batman is he's a creature of the night. And he just starts going on and on about creature of the night and mysterious, whatever. And it went on for several minutes. And I see Neil leaning over to Denny going like, what the hell is he talking about? So I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
But, I hold the a place of honor because Dan DiDio in his last bunch of conventions, like later on in my run at DC, they were starting to give some of those responsibilities to other people in the building, so to speak. And Dan kept insisting he wants me to run any panel that he was running because I was the only person who could keep up with him. Sure. Because he would just jump all over the place.
Right. Sure.
So
no, I know Dan a little bit, so it makes a lot of sense. There was a panel at Baltimore that he did. That was, and it went. That's actually my first tangential appearance in the comic book sphere of news, because I asked a question on the panel.
Okay, yeah.
And the reason I firmly believe this, and he won't remember it because that's who he is. But I think he let me ask the question because I had ran into him in the hall earlier, and when I am not wearing my glasses and shave my face like him, there's some resemblance.
Yeah.
And it has fooled people, or freaked people out at least. Tom King several times, and
Tom King should understand this stuff. I mean, wasn't he in the CIA or something?
Yeah, he
just go, rip off your face and look, it's me.
Right. Well, he freaked out. He's like, "Oh, you're not Dan."
That's hilarious.
And, but anyway, I ran into him in the hallway, and I said, I got to take a picture because I have to prove to Tom that we're not the same person. He didn't like it too much. But anyway, so yeah, I asked him a question, and that's how I first got in. But following him on a panel, that's I don't think you were there. I don't think, because there was no visual.
Oh yeah, occasionally he would do one of those Sunday conversations with Dan panels where it would just be.
Well, it was everybody. It was actually everybody who was DC Jason on this panel, and then Dan telling what's coming on. Right.
Okay.
It was one of those things, and I asked him, and I actually followed this up years later. I'd asked him at the time because I think we were in Rebirth, and I was like, "Well, when is the Legion coming back?" Right. And his answer was, somebody on this panel might be writing it. and so then apparently Rich was in the room because it made it to Bleeding Cool.
Sure. Well, he could have been, but they have he has what do you call them, stringers.
Sure. Well, whatever. Yeah. So it made it to Bleeding Cool, but
yeah,
that never happened because Brian wasn't on that panel. And so I asked Dan years later. I'm like, "Hey, do you remember I asked you that?" I'm like, what were you reacting to? And he told me there was somebody else who's a very very big name now and was starting to become a big name then,
Uh,
who had a Legion pitch that they thought that was going to go off, but it didn't.
yeah, I remember Dan telling me that the character he got pitched most was Commandy.
Really?
Everybody wanted to write Commandy, which I thought was great. It's like, yeah, I could see that.
Well, then they did the Commandy
challenge. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
which
great.
is a lot of fun.
Well,
Cool.
everybody wants to write. Everybody wants to write. You know, Kirby characters.
Yeah, and that's such a big, rich world.
Mhm.
You know, there's
So
so
many different
much.
places to go with it. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're not currently employed by a publisher, but you are definitely freelancing with other stuff.
You know, a little, and I am looking for an opportunity with a publisher, which I hope will come to pass, but it hasn't happened yet.
I'm confident.
Yeah.
There's plenty of room for your skills.
Thanks. Well, I think this will be a fantastic fit, and hopefully by like San Diego, you know, I'll be able to talk about it.
Oh, great! Good.
And I assume you'll be there.
I'm not this year. It's too much. Next year is my. I've never been to San Diego.
Oh, is that right?
I've never been. I've
Did not know that.
I've last couple of years. I'm like, I'll go next year, and I've now committed to. I have I have to make Tom Zoller make me go next year.
Okay.
So yeah, he has to like really push me into it, and I want to. It's a lot for me to go out there at that time, but I'm gonna do it. Well, I have a bunch of shows to do this on. I don't really do a lot of stuff on the West Coast because I got to fly all the way out there, and
Yeah.
I can drive to a lot of the shows on the East Coast. I was just talking to somebody today. I think I've got, one a month through October at least.
Oh, sure.
Between now and then,
There's a lot of shows.
there's a lot of shows, a lot of good ones too. So
Yes.
so yeah, well, but there will. I'm gonna put it here right now. Tom Zoller will be on a panel at San Diego that people should go check out, and
cool.
I'll put it out there because he did did the art and lettering and coloring for a benefit book that is going to be released in San Diego.
Oh, great. Which one?
I don't know the name of it. Something about hunger, stopping hunger.
All right, great.
Cool. We'll put some news out about it. So
that's great. So I'll mention, since we're talking about this kind of thing, I pitched San Diego a panel this year.
Right.
First time ever, my own thing. And it got approved, and I'm recruiting people to be on it right now.
Awesome.
Actually, somebody just texted me 5 minutes ago responding to a text I sent earlier, and I have to call him back after this. So I think I'll have my panel together pretty soon. I can't really talk about what it is, but it'll be fun. It's sort of a game show thing.
Awesome.
And it ties into the theme of untold stories.
I like that.
Yeah, I think it's been really a lot of fun.
That's fantastic. That's great.
Yeah. Cool.
Can we? What have you read? You're still reading new comics today?
I do read comics.
What have you read lately that you've liked?
I read comics, but I don't read tons of comics.
No, I understand that.
It's just too much. I like the new Conan that's coming from Titan.
That's good.
Written by Jim Zub, art mostly by Roberto De La Torre. He's terrific. What did I just read? Void Rivals. I've been reading and enjoying a lot.
What did you think of the new Dick Tracy?
I have to take another look at it. I read it. I did like it, and I just feel like I read it too quickly, and now I can't quite remember what I read.
Okay,
I got to go back and look at it again. But Alex is an old friend, and I have a lot of faith in what he's going to do with it. That said, so when I was a kid, Dick Tracy was still running in the Daily News, and it was like really, 1970 or so, and Chester Gould had really moved really very far away from that hard-boiled early Dick Tracy, and I almost want to see somebody put that era in a comic book because it was just so bonkers.
Oh, the 70s version.
Yeah, the Moon Maid and there was a lot of science fiction that shoved in there for no apparent reason. But Alex and I guess it's Mike Murachie who's co-writing it have really taken Dick Tracy back to its roots. The book looks great. You know, they're reestablishing the early characters, and that's always a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to seeing where they go next with it. You know,
good. I think so too. I like the first issue too.
And what was that other? There was a Rick Remender book that came out recently that is another one I feel like I have to reread.
So there's two that are coming out. The one is Sacrificers that I've liked that he's read.
Yes.
Is that the one you're talking about?
No, Napalm something.
Yeah, Napalm Lullaby.
Napalm Lullaby. I'm going like Napalm.
Yeah,
Sunday.
That is bonkers. That's
what I was just gonna say. It was like I read it and I'm like I liked it, but I don't know quite what I read.
Let me tell you, that first issue of that book, I went, what the, like 4 times.
Yeah,
because it was so well done, and Bengal's drawing it, right? So they're a great team. Yep. If you're looking for if his Death or Glory that they did together a few years ago, that book is so underrated, really good. It is a cinematic car chase with lots on the line, and it's really good. So I was excited going to this, knowing that they've done that type of work before. But Death or Glory is something I recommend to everybody.
Nice. I'll definitely look for that. And then I'm also excited about in a couple of weeks, Fantagraphics has the Web of Horror collection coming out, which I used to have those issues, and there's a ton of good stuff in there, and they've actually got the 4th issue and stuff that was being put together for the 5th issue all in this book. So it's like, that's going to be fantastic.
So I want to talk just a little bit about, so there's an omnibus that just came out like last year that was a pretty big deal in the life of Adam Phillips.
Yes. So crazy.
And like, so we're talking about Marvel Age, and Marvel Age was, I don't know, maybe it explains where I am today, but I loved Marvel Age. I was like, I feel like it came out around the same time, like Marvel Saga came out around that same time, and I think Classic X-Men came out around that same time. It was all that, like, these were comics. They weren't necessarily comics, but they were comics from a comic book company about comics.
Yes.
And they were on the shelf, and they were cheap too. That was another thing.
Oh yeah.
But Marvel Age Omnibus came out, and you did a lot of work for that. That was one of your really first things in the business.
It's true.
Working there, you weren't necessarily on staff, and I know that's kind of in, again, Untold Stories on Substack by Adam Phillips. There's a lot of the details in there that you get filled in on. But
it
was, what was that like to have something that you worked on so much to have all together in one?
Oh, it's amazing. It's especially something like that, because Marvel Age, it's like a catalog. It's kind of disposable. You don't really think anyone's going to care about it. And somehow Marvel decided that this was something they wanted to collect. I couldn't really argue about that, And there's a lot of cool stuff buried in there. I mean, there's like several gag cartoons by Paul Smith about Conan, that I kind of forgot existed. There's all that Fred Hembeck material.
Yes, that was, to be honest with you.
Oh my God,
it was the Hembeck stuff that kept me coming back after every month.
Yeah, he was like the only through line through the entire series, pretty much. So yeah, it was really incredible to see that, and some, I had to reread some of the articles I wrote back then. Some of it holds up okay. And some I read it and just went like, oh boy, I didn't know what I was doing.
I mean, so
it's a long time ago.
All right, here you go. The coloring glides were amazing.
Yeah.
And apparently there was an article on comic book coloring that was
Yep.
that was instrumental in Mr. Zoller's career.
Yeah. And I think I said in my Substack newsletter about that I did a bunch of coloring for Marvel.
Mhm.
And the funny thing was I went to School of Visual Arts, and like I learned a bunch of stuff about coloring from a teacher I had there, Sal Amendola, who was a comic book artist as well, and he did some editing and things. And he kind of taught me how to color comics wrong. So
Okay.
I had to like relearn it. It was just really funny. Like he was so I took a perspective class from him, perspective drawing. And part of that was also, not just drawing with 3-point perspective or whatever, but also using effects like color to create the illusion of depth in a drawing. And we were using watercolors, and he kept encouraging me that way. And he actually gave me some like very first coloring work on New Talent Showcase. But he didn't tell me like, get a set of Dr. Martin's dyes and use this. And, he just sort of said like, get a few bottles of them and mix them all different ways. And it's like the mixing never looked good. And if you get the Dr. Martin's dyes in this big box, then you would get more of the colors that would be correctly anyway. So I had to like relearn it. And then, I did do a bunch of coloring as well as writing for Marvel Age, as well as editing, assistant editing, which is a lot of like, knocking on editors' doors and asking if they can give us their write-ups for what's going to happen in their comics next month.
Right. Well, I mean, that's great. Now you have this giant thing that, like, I don't know how to read an omnibus. I don't know how to, like, you can't have one. You need a lectern. Like, you can't, like, it's not for bed reading, for sure.
Yeah. They actually had reprinted another one of something else I did for Marvel Age that was not in the omnibus yet. They did a bunch of soft cover trades of Howard the Duck.
Right.
And the final volume included the article that I wrote about Howard the Duck, like just as I was leaving Marvel Age. And it was sort of it's a very strange article because I was trying to play it like, well, he's a real person or a real thing, and he's in Hollywood, but he's a recluse and he doesn't want to be bothered, and he's got a movie coming out, and it sort of works. The covers on that issue by Kyle Baker worked really well, though.
Oh, yeah.
He basically did that, like, I love LA driving down the highway image with Howard in the car, So they put that in the Howard the Duck book, which is kind of cool.
Oh, I remember, I had that. I definitely had that issue. I'm looking at it right now. Let's see if I can.
Okay, yeah. And then, that's the one.
Yep, absolutely.
I'm a huge Howard the Duck fan, and I was kind of thrilled. Like, I didn't realize that Steve Gerber had come back and written a bunch of She-Hulks featuring Howard the Duck. So that was all in that same book too. These are all issues I worked on. Yeah.
Yeah. This cover, I love.
Oh man, cover. Yeah. No, that was one of the cool things about Marvel Age. They would always, the editor Jim Salcup would always get something interesting on the cover. Okay, maybe not Saul Brodsky, but
no, that was a good one though. But like I said, as we were talking earlier though, before we got on, I remember buying this one on the shelf. This was the beginning of X Factor and what was happening, because obviously this is like, it's a house ad that's a book that you can buy for still only 35 cents. Yeah. But even here, they're not spoiling what's up in X Factor, because you got 4 guys and somebody's missing.
Yeah, the X Factor stuff was very tricky, as I recall.
I'm sure.
Oh, look, issue 34 right there, by the way, is the first one I was officially, assistant editing on. And I'll tell you, I remember the issue was running late, and one of the things I was trying to help with was like getting everything back on schedule. But I remember we were working on that cover, getting it colored in the bullpen during a Christmas party.
Nice. It's great. It's a great cover, though. I remember, I again, like, because I saw that one, I think, you go, like, back in the day, you would go to the store, I'm like, oh, I'll get the next one. I remember having this one. I think I have a couple of these.
Oh, yeah. Okay, wait. One. So if you look at the back row of people, there's a big guy in a yellow shirt in the middle.
Let's see if I can. Yeah, I see that.
That's James Fry.
Okay.
And to his right is Tom Morgan in the blue shirt.
On the blue shirt.
That was another bullpen guy. And then with the T-square, I think that's Mark McKenna. He's got a T-square holding it like a sword.
That's awesome.
And then I think I am the next person over. I can't really tell here. And I think Kurt Busick is it with the white shirt and the tie. But
yeah, so Kurt on the other side, right? Okay, that makes sense.
Anyway,
that's
like
funny.
To the edge there. Anyway, so yeah, we had all these different freelancers come in for a day, and each freelancer would follow one editor around taking notes on what they did. And that was back when there were all these coffee table books coming out: A Day in the Life of California, A Day in the Life of the Soviet Union, A Day in the Life of whatever. So we did that Day in the Life of Marvel Comics issue.
There's some great stuff.
Yeah, it was so much fun.
Sure.
This was the big one where they X'd out. I mean, they like blacked out, every other word in the article, I think.
Oh, really? Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway. Yeah.
So yeah, some good stuff.
Yeah.
It's important, like I said.
If they do another one, I'll be happy to get one somehow.
All right. We're getting close to the end here, but this has been so much fun, Adam. I appreciate it. I want to give you one of our nerdy questions that we ask a lot. So, what is, if you can take a minute, and I'll tell people my old story. What is your favorite single issue of comic book that you've ever read? Do you know this is my favorite issue I've ever read?
I can think of a couple, and they're like real formative comics out of childhood. But like I said earlier, for anyone who didn't tune in or from the beginning, before I was about 12 years old, all the comics I got were given to me by my mother's parents whenever they came to visit. And I'll tell just briefly, they gave me comic books. First, it was like, Donald Duck and Disney comics and Dennis the Menace. And then it became like Superman and whatever. And then Mad Magazine. And then when I was like 13 or 14, they started giving me Sports Illustrated. And I said, could you go back to the Mad Magazine? Sure. I never cared about sports. Anyway. So two I really loved. One was, I'm not going to remember the issue number, but it was an Uncle Scrooge issue that came out in like 1967 or so. So I was pretty small. And it was one of the last issues Carl Barks wrote. He didn't draw it, but he wrote it. Called King Scrooge Shaw the First. And the story is about the ducks are like wandering through a park, and they see a fortune teller booth, and they go in, and the fortune teller recognizes them, and he's sort of dressed in like Egyptian garb or something, and he recognizes them and hypnotizes them and regresses them to their past lives as rulers of ancient Egypt. And because he wants to find this this treasure that was lost, thousands of years ago. And the creepy thing about it is that, like, at the end of the story, we find out this wizard guy, this fortune teller, was a wizard in the court of the pharaoh who had become immortal and was just trying to find the cure for his immortality so he could go and die. And at the end of the issue, he like walks off into the desert, all wrinkly and falling apart. And that's the one. Yeah. King Scrooge the First. So, man, that's pretty dark for a small kid. But, they didn't read it first, obviously.
Yeah, no, here you go.
And then
Carl's like, I'm way out.
the other one I'd point to is Iron Man number 28, written by Archie Goodwin, art by Don Heck and somebody, I can't remember who, maybe Mike Esposito. And it's kind of like an Iron Man take on Dark Shadows, where like Tony Stark gets a call from his old girlfriend who's working in a sanatorium. And when he gets there, it's spooky as hell. And all the people in the sanatorium are now living human batteries for the controller. But it was like the romance part of that story really hooked me, even though I was probably, 8 or something. I mean, it was just like, you never got that with Superman.
Is it this one? You said 22. Is it this one?
28.
Oh, 28. I'm sorry.
It's got a great Marie Severin cover.
Oh. Yep.
Yeah.
This one. That's a famous cover. That's a very famous
cover. It's a fabulous cover.
Marie Severin. So my like I have this, back at this point, I'm just being very picky about what I want to go buy and what I want to collect and reacquire stuff. So I'm kind of going to try and do like the X-Men from like 94 to like 230. That's like the part that I'm matters to me about the most.
Sure.
But prior to that, there's an issue that I need to get to reacquire because I used to have it, and it's 52. I think it's 52. It's the one with Eric the Red.
Oh yeah,
it's a Marie Severin cover.
Yeah,
I love that cover.
Sure. No, she was fantastic. Weirdly, so like most of my adult life until 9 years ago, I lived in Essex County, New Jersey, and
I lived there as well at times.
Oh yeah, I was in Glenridge.
I was in Kenilworth.
Oh, okay, cool. And our friends, whose like kids were in school with our kids, the woman had grown up down the street from Marie Severin, and they called her Aunt Marie because she was just like, she wasn't related, but she was an aunt.
Right.
And she knew her really well, but had no idea that she was a comic book artist or anything, or what. Anyway, I just thought that was wild.
I think that's cool. I think is also cool. Like, so I think Colleen Doran has her art tools. I know she has Nick Cardy's, but I think she has Marie's as well.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
Yep.
The other crazy thing out of Glenridge like that was that friends of ours were having the reception for their kids' bar mitzvah in their backyard in a big tent.
Yep.
And they were real busy and whatever. And then a couple of days later, they were telling us about it, and they said, "Oh, and the kids are so happy. Uncle Gene was drawing Batman for everyone."
Colin.
And I said, "What, Uncle Gene?" Yes, it was Gene Colan.
Nice.
I'm like, why didn't you tell me? I'm in the comic business. You know how much I love comics. I would have been there bugging him for a Howard the Duck
of course.
Heartbeat, I'm sure. So maybe it was better that I didn't go.
Sure. Well,
anyway.
This has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you doing this. We're definitely going to do it again. Hopefully there'll be more to talk about.
Yeah.
Everyone, I want you please to go, if you subscribe to Substack, make sure you add Adams. It's Adam Phillips at Substack.com.
Thank you.
And
I appreciate it.
If you don't subscribe to Substack, it's a good reason why to. It's a good
it is easy. I mean, I would love to get some paying subscribers, but you can subscribe for free, and it's real easy.
Sure.
And I'm putting out new episodes every week. So, yeah, and hopefully I'll come back sometime, and we'll talk about the podcast that we're going to be starting. Me and my friend Carr D'Angelo are restarting our podcast. We were doing a Defenders podcast a few years ago.
Yes.
And now we're going to do more of a general interest comics podcast.
Nice.
So
I like that. There's been some good ones coming out lately, and I'm excited about that. Yeah, absolutely. We'll love to have you on. Thanks
so
for
much.
everybody for watching. I'm going to let you go, Adam, and we'll be in touch. And when you do have info about your panel at San Diego, let us know so we can promote it on the site. And
I appreciate it.
Sounds good.
Cool. All right. Thanks so much, Bob. Take care. Great talking to you.
Thanks for doing this, Adam.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay, everybody. It's been solo me tonight. Thank you all for hanging in. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. We are going to have a show next week. I am not 100% sure on our guest. We are close to confirming, but stay tuned to popculturesquad.com and all of our socials for information about what it is going to be and who is going to be, and come back next week and we'll do it all again. Hopefully Mike will be back with us, and we'll do it. Until then, see you later.